while the state was closed, we have a contract with the Kansas Department of Revenue Division of Vehicles where we issue commercial vehicle tags and interstate motor carrier tags. And we did not shut down and have not shut down since the corona started. We do not let people into our office. We've tried to manage our staff, and we go out and get the information. The biggest expense we've had is masks and coats for my staff. So when they go out and get the information, but we're in our renewal period now through March 1st for truck registrations, and it's quite busy. We did 60 companies yesterday. So that kind of tells you what my staff of 5 is doing in the office. This is kind of my vacation because I get a break from it. But we've stayed safe. Nobody has contacted COVID. And we had a couple of scares, but it's been good. Today, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to talk, and a couple of you have already heard this before. It's been a couple of years, though. Kind of give you a briefing on Kansas trucking. This is my 38th session here, so I've been around a while, and some of you may remember Representative Bob Bethel. He had a license plate made for me. It says Trucker Tom, and it's on the front of my car, and I protect it with plastic because of who it came from. But the trucking industry in Kansas, there are 49, over almost half of the communities in this state depend entirely on trucks for transportation. And you might think that the industry is the UPSs, FedExes, Old Dominions, and those, they make up less than 0.5% of the industry. They operate a lot of trucks, but as far as the number of companies, 98% of the trucking companies in Kansas operate 25 or fewer trucks. 46% of all the trucking companies operate one truck. So it's made up of a lot of small businesses. There are about 9,300 companies in Kansas right now. So you can see if you take 46% of that, that's how many are one truck operators. Our industry provides about 70,000 jobs in the state, 1 in 16 jobs, with an annual payroll of $3.5 billion and an average annual salary of $49,562. One of the things that we do pay is highway user fees. We pay 41% of all taxes and fees owed by Kansas motorists, and we only represent 14% of the miles traveled in Kansas. We recognize that there are different sized vehicles, and we do pay more for those different sized vehicles, and I'll talk about that a little later. We pay the highway user taxes, and on top of that, we pay all other business taxes, be it income, franchise taxes, whatever those may be, and the fees. Now, to give you an idea of the industry, there are 4 basic groups. There are private carriers that haul their own goods. Kroger would be a private carrier, as an example. PepsiCo, Frito-Lay. There are also the for-hire carriers, the big ones I spoke about, or even the small cattle haulers that are hauling for hire, get paid for the loads. There are interstate motor carriers that travel across state lines or do what is known as a continuation of an interstate move, where it comes into Kansas and then it moves on to another location in Kansas. And then there are intrastate motor carriers that operate wholly within the state of Kansas. Those are the 4 basic groups that we'll be talking about. You can see in my document, I list all the types of carriers that belong to KMCA. So there's quite an array. Probably the ones that take the most time are the Towing and Recovery Division, but other than that, we represent all of these carriers. We have 965 member firms that belong to KMCA. Back in the days when we actually had tariffs, where the rates were regulated, we had 1,800 members. So a little bit different atmosphere under deregulation. One of the things you're going to hear about, and that you hear from your constituents, is, I don't want to get a DOT number. Every motor carrier is required to have a US DOT number for identification. We have some caveats in Kansas. We did this 4 or 5 years ago, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to remember when we did that for private carriers. In order to protect the small private carriers like the contractors and those currently interstate, a vehicle is a commercial vehicle if it's hauling in commerce and it has a gross vehicle weight rating of 10,001 pounds or more. And where you can find out your gross vehicle weight rating on your vehicle, it's on the little tag on the inside driver's door frame. It gives you the GBWR. Private carriers operating wholly in Kansas do not require a DOT number until they hit 26,001 pounds. And that is consistent with the CDL requirements for commercial driver's license. I will say there are 3 items that they must comply with over 10,001 pounds. That is an annual inspection of their vehicle, load securement, and coupling devices. And that came out of situations at the time the bill was being considered of small utility trailers coming off lawn care companies, and one of them took out a deputy sheriff and his wife in Barton County. And that's why coupling devices are included in the safety requirements. So, I want to become an interstate carrier. I want to cross state lines. I want to travel the 48 states. I have to get authority from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Remember that name because I get up here and start using FMCSA a lot when I talk. You're required to pay the fee. You have to file insurance, $750,000 for the basic carrier. If you're a gasoline hauler, $1 million liability insurance. And if you're hauling anhydrous ammonia, propane, or something in a pressurized vessel, it's $5 million. Now you can see why we are a target from the trial bar. We are currently fighting in many states to end lawsuit abuse and try and reform it. It used to be called tort reform. We're trying to be more serious about it because our insurance rates are going through the roof. Standard tractor trailer to insure it for a year is between $15,000 and $25,000. So now we're going to get into the other fees that are required for motor carriers. There is what is known as a Uniform Carrier Registration Fee, UCR. What that is, years ago, you used to go to every state and file your interstate authority, and you'd get a little sticker that went in this little square on a driver's or a license tag on the front of your truck. It used to be called a bingo card. Now you go to one place, the fees are disseminated throughout the states. Kansas is a participant, so annually you have to pay this fee by December 31st of the of the previous year for the next year. You're going to get authority, $250 application fee, and $10 per vehicle with the Kansas Corporation Commission. If you're a private carrier, it's a $100 application fee. The key thing that this does is require the filing of liability insurance so you know a commercial carrier is covered. And second of all, it makes them subject to the federal motor carrier safety rules, which equipment, driver qualifications, hours of service that they work, and many other things, including drug and alcohol testing, and some of those. I did want to talk about registration fees and how trucks pay registration fees. If I operate wholly in Kansas, I'm going to pay an annual registration fee of $1,870. You can see Colorado, Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's cheap. But I'm an interstate carrier. So I'm going to pay my registration fees based on my percent of miles traveled in a given state. So as you can see my example at the bottom of page 4, I operate 50% of my miles in Kansas. I pay Kansas $935, and you can go on down, and under this example, the total registration fee for that tractor trailer annually is $1,743. That does not include in Kansas the commercial vehicle fee. Kansas has what is known, as I said, the commercial vehicle fee, and I've attached what it is on back in this testimony. But years ago, we used to have a motor carrier property tax, and it only applied to for-hire carriers. You had to do a separate filing with the Division of Property Valuation. Half the carriers did not submit the reports because if you were in New York, you owed Kansas and drove through Kansas, you'd owed Kansas property tax. So in 2012, we changed it to make it a commercial vehicle fee. So every commercial vehicle pays a fee based on their weight each year in lieu of property tax. But the thing about it with this IRP registration that I was just talking about, if I'm an Idaho carrier, a New York carrier, a Florida carrier, and I come through Kansas, that shows up on my IRP registration, and we included the commercial vehicle fee in that registration fee. So there is no tax avoidance in lieu of property tax, and it raises the same amount of money that it used to raise. So it was revenue neutral, but it sure made compliance a lot easier. And I don't get the calls saying they just valued my vehicles twice as much as I paid for them originally. So we're pleased with that. The other thing that's required is, we call it Ifta, the International Fuel Tax Agreement. You pay fuel tax based on your miles and gallons operated in every state you operate, but you pay it in one place, and that's in Kansas, and Kansas distributes the funds. If I'm from Oklahoma, Kansas gets the fuel tax funds from Oklahoma carriers that come through the state. And the key thing is, it is required by federal law that states participate in both the international registration for registration fees and the Ifta program. But that makes sure that Kansas gets what's coming for it. Keep in mind the average miles per gallon of a truck tractor is about 5 miles a gallon. Older ones, less. Some of the new ones get 6.5 to 7.5 miles per gallon. So now for the rest of the fees. These are all federal. If I have a truck over 54,000 pounds, I pay what is known as the federal heavy vehicle use tax. It is a flat fee. It is based on the weight that you register. For a standard 80,000-pound tractor, it's $550 a year. I also pay about $36 a tire in federal excise tax for truck tires. Now, if I go buy a new vehicle, I'm going to pay a 12% federal excise tax on any truck or truck tractors, including trailers, over 33,000 pounds, trailers over 26. So if I, kind of a rough price because they keep going up, 150,000 for a tractor trailer, I'd pay $18,000 in the federal excise tax on top of that price. Now, one of the bargains we get right now is the Kansas Turnpike. They want more commercial traffic. We are approximately 46% of their revenue and about 15% of their traffic. They can make a lot of money off of us to get more of us on there, and they've done that, and I want to compliment the KTA. They raised the bridges so they can get oversized loads on the turnpike. Used to be if you had a 14-foot tractor trailer, you were just barely going to scrape the bottom of some of those bridges, but now they've raised them, and they did it so economically, it's incredible. They literally jacked them up and built back in underneath them rather than replace all the bridges. Pretty spectacular, Mr. Chairman, and I know you're part of that on the Turnpike Authority. Now let's talk about the size of big trucks. Currently, actually in December of 1982, federal law passed that said you couldn't set a truck trailer length of less than 48 feet, and that's what controlled the overall length of the truck and trailer. It used to be 65 feet for years, both truck and trailer. That's when you used to see those little tiny cab over trucks out there, and the bouncing from the steering axle would drive the drivers nuts in order to get more payload on a longer trailer. Well, back at the time when we did that, we were grandfathered. We had trailers running that were 59 feet 6 inches. And they were operated by a company called Continental Can. And they used those trailers to haul empty aluminum cans. And they would run out of volume space long before they hit the weight, and they were able to put a real skinny tractor on the front of that to get within the 65 feet. So we were grandfathered. You will see very few trailers that length. The standard is about 53 feet on a trailer, and the combination runs about 70 to 72 with the longer nose tractors. Boat transporters and automobile haulers, they get up to 75 feet. And straight trucks, just a straight truck is limited to 45 feet long. And any combination other than a tractor trailer or twin trailers is limited to 65 feet, so a truck trailer. 13.6 is our basic height. 14 feet, except we give a break for cylindrically shaped bales of hay. And federal law says our maximum gross weight on our interstate that we can carry is 80,000 pounds. Now, since 1960 something, we've been operating 85.5 off the interstate. But there are a couple of things that you got to do to haul those loads. And I've put some pictures in the back to kind of give you an idea, but let's just start with the basic tractor trailer. You got 5 axles. What we call them is the steering axle and 2 sets of tandem axles. You've got to meet your axle weights because you can't exceed 34,000 pounds on a tandem axle. So you got 34, 34, and whatever the front weighs, which is usually 12 or less. But you don't stop there. You got to meet the gross weight, the axle weights, and then you got to meet the distance between those axles, which is called the bridge formula. And that is so we spread those loads out when they go over bridges, that the weight isn't compressed to a smaller area. And those are federal requirements. A few years ago, actually it's only been a couple, the legislature passed a special permit for 90,000 pounds with agricultural products. The key to that one, and there's an example in here, is that you have to have at least 6 axles to carry it, and the axles have to be spaced properly. It is $200 to go from 85.5 to the 90. Up until this last emergency declaration, we had a 10% tolerance above your registered gross weight up to 90,000 pounds in weight if you were hauling supplies for COVID. And one of those supplies for COVID included livestock. Because we were, I don't know about you, but I started stocking my freezer up in March with Kansas beef because it was a little lean in the grocery store in April and May. But that was not renewed in the latest emergency. A lot of the surrounding states dropped that 10%. So if they want to go above the 85.5, they need to get the $200 permit and properly have the right equipment to haul that. The last thing I want to talk about is the safety requirements. For years, we were regulated by our rates, what we could charge. In Kansas, if you were in Hayes or Sterling and you wanted to move a load of widgets, you would pay exactly the same price per mile for that move. Because the tariffs were across the board, protected from Sherman Antitrust Act, and were set by the Corporation Commission. Interstate, that disappeared in 1982. Intrastate, it disappeared on January 1 of 1995. But what came to replace that is truck safety. And I want to reiterate, this industry does its best to be the safest vehicles out on the highway. Now, just like any group, there's always a few that try and get around it. But don't paint the whole industry bad by a few bad apples. Now, there are several different rules that apply, and I'm going to highlight a couple. Is vehicle markings with DOT number, driver qualifications. You can be 18 years old in Kansas and drive a tractor trailer from Kansas City, Kansas to Hugoton, Kansas. But you cannot drive at 18 from Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri. I use this example. I was fortunate enough, former Representative Hazlett got a group to be distinguished guests of the Navy. We flew out and landed on the USS Nimitz, so I'm an official tail hooker, as they say. But I asked the commander, what's the average age of the people on this flight deck? 17. And you can't drive from Kansas City, Kansas, to Kansas City, Missouri. It just says if you have the proper training, you can do the job. There's my little editorial comment for today. Trucks are required to have a lot of emergency equipment, lighting, recently the conspicuity tape that you see along the side of the trailers that reflects. Our liability limits have been stable for a while, but commercial vehicle operators are prohibited from operating handheld mobile devices and texting while operating a commercial vehicle. Unfortunately, that's not the case unless you live in Manhattan because of their ordinance or some of those areas. But I see that's coming up on your agenda for road construction areas, and the less distracted driving we have out there, the better. The AAA Foundation did a study and found out that in 78% of the truck car crashes, the car is at fault. And it's getting worse with distracted driving and the cell phone. By the way, mine's back there, so I don't get disturbed. The other things that we have to deal with are load securement. We have to inspect our vehicles daily, provide maintenance and repair, and when they find a violation on the roadside, they put a little orange sticker in our window and we can't move that truck until it's repaired. And that counts against your safety rating, which is public, that anybody can see. And shippers look at that to decide if they're going to put a product on the back of your truck. So it's very important that you maintain a good safety rating. The other thing that we do is drivers that have CDLs are subject to drug and alcohol testing, pre-employment, random, and post-accident. There is something new on the horizon. There is now a drug and alcohol testing clearinghouse. So medical review officers are required to report to the federal government a positive test or a refusal to test, which is a positive. This way, a carrier is required to go in and check that database before they hire a driver. We haven't had a situation where I'd come to Peterson Trucking and apply for a job and he'd do the post or pre-employment test and I'd test positive for an edible that I bought out in Colorado last week. So he can't hire me, so I go wait 30 days and I go over to Hawk Trucking and I'm clean and I apply and I get put on. Well, you have no way of knowing that that driver tested positive for marijuana. And do you want him behind the wheel of your 80,000-pound truck? And this clearinghouse will stop that from happening. The other thing that we require and have since the early 90s is a commercial driver's license. This has been a challenging time with COVID, with driver's licenses, period. Is being able to get in, get a test, get your renewal done. The federal government has issued several extensions, so right now, there are drivers out there that are driving with CDLs that expired in April and May. And, but because the federal government said they have until February 28th to get everything done because of COVID and shutdown, and it's an in-person interaction to get your renewals. Those extensions have done. The other extension that's provided is every 2 years a driver is to get a medical certificate. They can be shorter depending on blood pressure and those items, but that has been extended. So trying to get into a doctor to get a physical has been very difficult under the stress of COVID. It's almost like elective surgery. Don't even try. But those are some of the items that I wanted to talk to you about. This document is more of a reference material. You will see all the registration fees and the different types of truck registrations we have. You will see the commercial vehicle fees, the axle limitations, the bridge formula. And if you'd like to spend some time one day, I'll be happy to take you through the bridge formula and draw circles on a chalkboard to teach you how that works. And examples of weights and trucks. And the last two things, Mr. Chairman, I want to talk about is we have two programs, and in the back of this information that we work very hard. One is Sharing the Road, is teaching drivers about the no zones around tractor trailers and where not to be. Unfortunately, we have a road team of professional drivers that goes out and talks to driver's ed classes and those. Number one, the classes aren't happening, and number two, the drivers aren't allowed to go out. So until we get through this mess, we'll be back in business with our road team out there teaching them how to share the road. The other thing that we are involved with, and we started, KMCA did about 8 years ago with Truckers Against Trafficking. We have trained literally millions of truck drivers on what to watch out for to spot trafficking of young folks, especially in roadside parks and truck stops and areas like that where they see them. They don't get involved, but they do report them. You can see that's on there. And then 4 years ago, we required anybody that renews a CDL or get a new CDL to go online, watch the video, take the 4-question test, and quote, be certified to watch out for human trafficking. And it's been a big thing for this industry. It is nationwide now, and everybody's getting trained and everybody's on the lookout. And we can stop a few of those. We've made some progress. So, as a matter of fact, the ones that were caught in Ohio recently with the 90 arrests originally were spotted by truckers. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to respond to questions.
Committee questions. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is your greatest challenge right now?
Finding drivers. Because of the qualifications you have to meet. I mean, think if you were in Colorado right now with recreational marijuana. Half of your pool is already disqualified because they can't meet it. The other big problem we've got is that 18 to 21 gap. There is no provision, there's currently a study, but no provision that allows a trucking company to hire an 18-year-old, put them through a training system over 2 or 3 years, kind of like a graduated driver's license, to get them up where they can actually go cross that state line between Kansas and Missouri. We lose them after high school. We're the second or third career for a young person because they got to find something to do for that 3 years. So that's our biggest problem, is the driver shortage, and it's getting worse.
Thank you for that. Do you see any benefit in some of the technical institutes in our state that have been offering CDL licensing for older adults?
Absolutely.
Has it been helpful? Have you seen a return on investment there?
We're seeing more and more get into the system. Then comes the other side of it. If you don't have a way to train those drivers going up, then the other side of the equation becomes the insurance companies. They don't want to insure them unless they have a couple of years of experience. And how do you get experience? A lot of our drivers today come from the farm because they have experience driving farm trucks. But it's not just in Kansas, it's nationally, but we've done a pretty good job of getting technical schools up to speed, doing a proper job to do the training for CDLs. And it's important because whether I work for Yellow Freight or I work for Evergy, we move trucks, we got to have CDLs. Just that simple.
Committee, further questions? Thank you, Tom. Oh, Senator Hawk.
Thank you, and I'm always concerned about safety and always learn something new when you present this, Tom, so thank you. How many feet, and I suppose it depends on how fast you're going, I'm just looking at your last slide, before you come back into that lane when you pass a truck?
Well, you can see in my diagram the length of time it takes that truck to stop. I always kind of follow the old thing and make sure I can see the whole front of the truck in my rearview mirror before I come back in.
Good guidance.
It's kind of like cars, and my new one has those little orange lights, you know, on the mirrors, and I really like that because it tells you when you can come back in. I drove through some big city traffic when I first got it, and it sure made life easy. That and the variable cruise control, you just set it and go. But yeah, I was fortunate enough to take driver's ed, and that's one thing I remember is you make sure you can see the full front of the vehicle in your rear view mirror before you move over.
Is it your experience that if you have that blind spot monitor in your car, that you're far enough ahead where I haven't looked,
No, not.
I watch mine, but I haven't looked to see if I see the whole vehicle in there.
When it goes
I see
off,
people.
I look in the mirror and I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah, I see a lot of people cutting in much sooner than they should.
I would warn you not to cut in front of a big truck.
Yeah, I think that's good.
You'll lose.
I assume the highway patrol doesn't give people tickets for cutting in too soon. I'm not sure about that.
There have been programs throughout the last few years that the patrol used to, troopers in trucks, get into the trucks with the cameras and go out and aggressively or enforce aggressive driving around trucks. And cutting somebody off is. So why take your life in? I just can't imagine doing that. But I guess I've been around trucks for 38 years. Before I started, I didn't know what a fifth wheel was on the back of a truck. So,
Well, Tom, that's possible.
I'll try to be quick. I have a sense that there are a lot more trucks on the road, and I know the pandemic has changed that. Is there any data about, say, over the last 20 years, how many trucks are on the road in terms of percent more? Is my perception correct that there are a lot more trucks on the road in traffic, or is that just my limited driving habits between Manhattan and Topeka every day?
well, I did this presentation 2 years ago to the House. And at that time, our percentage of miles traveled was 12%. So it's up. I mean, it's up. I tell you what, our truckers really liked COVID because nobody was driving. And they were on the road. The only problems we had during that time, Pennsylvania shut down all their roadside stops. No eating places were allowed. And truckers couldn't do anything to get their product delivered, but they got it done. But it is slowly increasing the amount of freight. More freight is coming into what they call the last mile, like the BNSF intermodal over in Johnson County. The last mile is the number of trucks moving out of that facility to where that container is going to end up, or picking up that container and taking it. The trips have become shorter than they used to be. But the percentage of miles has gone up.
Thank you for your presentation. Committee, I note that Tom has his card with his contact information inside your folder. He is an excellent resource. There'll be multiple bills over the next few years that you may want to give him a ring on and just touch base on some questions. The only thing I didn't see in there that he's provided us in years past was a glossary of some acronyms.
I can take care of that, Mr. Chairman.
I believe
I'll get
that
one to the committee.
he would be more than happy to do that sometime in the future and email it to Florence. Committee, we have about 7 minutes left in the room. I would like to turn our attention to Senate Bill 33, the bill that we heard Friday. Adam, are you prepared to give us a briefing on that?
Sure, Mr. Chair, if you give me 1 second. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You said Senate Bill 33, right?
Yes.
Okay. Senate Bill 33, if you may recall, it provides for the new display show license that vehicle dealers and manufacturers could obtain. It'll be identified as a temporary display show license. It would allow the sponsor to obtain such a license from the Division of Vehicles for the ability to organize and operate a display show in the state of Kansas under conditions that would be set by the Director of Vehicles. There would be a fee in the amount of $100, and then each additional participant would pay a fee of $35, and this money would be remitted to the Director of Vehicles. Eligible participants would be allowed to attend participate in the show without regard to geographical, territorial assignment, or market area, and they're not required to obtain any approval prior to being a participant in the show. And then lastly, no sales or lease transactions may occur at the display show. However, demonstrations and test drives are permitted. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, are there questions for Adam? Seeing none. Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill? Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This being a bill of non-controversial nature, I'll make a motion to recommend passage favorably on the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Senator Pittman. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, committee. We made it out of here on time. I know there's another committee coming in. Just stay tuned on your calendars. We'll try and work another bill here pretty soon, and we'll try and let you know. And Adam, I'll give you a heads up next time. Thank you very much. With that, we are adjourned.